Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, let's start out with the news of the week. Michael Locksley confirmed to return to Maryland. Tom, can you kind of take us through, I know as a board member, you're not entirely directly involved with athletic department decisions, but I'm sure you're in the know more than most people. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what you've gathered from the past couple weeks about Locksley's future and how confident you feel in him and Jim Smith's ability to lead that program moving forward?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you. And, I've had some meetings with Jim Smith, the new AD, who I think I regard very highly. I think he's so well skilled, and he's also, I just think he's got all the ingredients to be a great AD. Energetic, he listens, he takes a lot of information in, and he makes decisions. And so first of all, I just want to say I think Dr. Fines and the university picked a very good AD, even though he's non-traditional in the sense he did not come directly from college sports. I think he brings a lot of skill sets to the table. When it comes down to the Locksley decision, I mean, it's a tough decision. You see all these coaches being fired across the landscape. Personally, I wear my kind of reformer hat on this. I find these buyouts, these couple $100 million buyouts in the last 6 months, I quite frankly think they're outrageous. I mean, here we're spending this kind of money to pay for coaches who really failed. And so I kind of admire Jim for not getting on that coaching carousel. I know some fans may be upset because they say, well, we're not going to win and we're going to be, we're going to be behind the eight ball here. But I think that what's happening in college sports is that there's going to be a reaction to this. I don't know how it will materialize, but when schools are spending this kind of money to really pay a coach to leave, I think it's just crazy. So for Maryland's case, I think they would have had to pay Locksley like $10 million. Then they're going to have to spend a lot of money on a new coach. So I think strategically, I think Jim said, look, let's focus on getting resources together. Let's kind of follow the Indiana model where they really up their resources going into football, and let's see what that will bring about. So it's a tough decision, but I think that he recognizes that Locksley is a good coach. He's gone to the bowl several times in a row, and the Big Ten is an extremely tough conference for football, and but he's going to give him a chance with resources to see how it goes. So I mean, people can argue both sides of it, but I think that I admire Jim for not just running down that rat hole, paying coaches who do not succeed.
I guess one of my biggest questions when that news was released was about the resources. Jim Smith obviously says that there's going to be more resources poured into the program going forward, but I mean, where will these resources be coming from, and why haven't they already been in College Park since these NIL laws took place in 2021?
Well, it's a good question. So I serve on the board. I serve on the advancement committee of the board. Maryland traditionally, amongst all the Big Ten schools, is really at the bottom of fundraising, both for the general university and for the athletic department. I think we're down with Rutgers as raising the least amount of money. So I view that as an opportunity. And I think Jim is going to engage at all levels to try to raise money. I mean, one of the failures in Maryland over the years is that, we have this great group of alumni, but we haven't stayed connected to it. I'll tell you something you'll find surprising. I had my 50th anniversary graduating from Maryland recently with Len Elmore and my class, and the whole time of those 50 years, we never had a class reunion. I had never had a class reunion at Maryland. So our class never got together. When I'm at Oxford on my Rhodes, we're talking about another reunion next year. We have them every 5 years. So it's really hard to raise money off alumni when you're not keeping in touch with them. And so I think there's got a lot of work that has to be done on engagement, because why are we at the bottom of the pack is because we don't engage. I mean, what they say about the Princeton alumni is that they could fine you if you were in the witness protection plan. And, Maryland has to kind of up its game to get reconnected to these mass alumni around the state, around the country, because I think they're fertile grounds to plow. And I think we have to try all that, get our resources up, kind of follow the Indiana model and see what it brings.
Why do you think Maryland was a school that hasn't been reaching out to the alumni in the way you just mentioned with some, Princeton type of schools? Why do you think that wasn't in place at Maryland for the past, you said 50 years?
Well, if you recall, Maryland was really a commuter school. So even when I went there, kids were driving to campus every day, going home, and then, sort of disconnecting from the school. And it's less so today, and it's much more of a residential campus than it is, but still a lot of kids drive in and park and go home after class. And it's doubly important for schools like Maryland to connect with those kids, to keep them engaged and so forth. So I think there's a great opportunity for Jim and for the whole university to re-engage with their alumni, because if you don't do that, I can tell you that at Carolina, for example, they have reunions every 5 years. The 50th reunion, they bring the whole class back, take them on the football field. I mean, for some reason, we haven't done that at Maryland, but I think it's a core problem. When you want people to invest in your athletics and invest in university, you have to stay connected to them. And, Harvard, Princeton, all those schools do an incredible job of that. And I think Maryland's got to up its game here.
Before we get back to the show, a quick word from our sponsor. The Catalyst to the Game is brought to you by Catalyst Hot Dogs. Catalyst brought the Jersey Dog to the DMV, featuring premium, dry-aged, black Angus, all-beef hot dogs that are made in Maryland. They're served with handmade toppings, including hot onions, relish, and their signature Texas chili sauce. Guys, I actually had a Catalyst hot dog the game because I had the day off, so I was like, you know what? I'm in the CQ stands. Let's go get a Catalyst hot dog. The Texas chili sauce, elite. And don't also miss their garlic knot dogs. Catalyst always offers vegan dogs as well as gluten-free buns, because Catalyst has food for everyone. You can find them in CQ Stadium in Section 14, in the Xfinity Center in Section 210. Tell the people, a hot dog is a sandwich. All right, now back to the show.
You were the president at Lead One, which is, the kind of unification of athletic directors. And after you resigned a couple of years ago, you talked about just how much fracture you've seen among ADs. One of those things that I think we've seen pop up recently is in the Big Ten with the equity deal. I guess just from your perspective, what are your thoughts on the deal in general? And then the recent news that came out of Michigan and USC declining really to want to participate. What do you think that means for the future of the Big Ten? So kind of a long question there, but I just am curious to see your thoughts, because I think you're very uniquely positioned to answer it.
Well, for years, I've been working on trying to consolidate television rights in college sports, sort of like the NFL, sort of an antitrust. Matter of fact, I put legislation in 1991 to do that, because if you put all those rights together and you bargain as one unit, you will be bargaining against the buyers, ESPN, Fox, and, all the other players in a sort of a singular fashion. Today, we have really 12 sellers of college sports, the NCAA, the College Football Playoff, 10 conferences. And we're dealing with only a handful of buyers. And so, I mean, the math is pretty simple. If you could consolidate that, that would make a lot of difference in terms of the resources that would come into college sports, not just for the bigger schools, but the smaller schools too. The things you could do to protect Olympic sports and women's sports and so forth. So I've been involved in that effort for years. I've been working with Senator Cantwell, who has put a bill forward on that matter. So, what the Big Ten's trying to do is do this deal that would you'd say, look, we're going to go down our own pathway. And, I think people can argue for it on both sides of it. My position on it has been, look, we as a board are not involved in that decision because of the bylaws at Maryland are somewhat antiquated to deal with this. But I think that all boards, whether any Big Ten board, should demand whatever information it wants out of this deal so they can analyze it, including getting third-party experts to help them evaluate the deal. I mean, that's just how multi-billion-dollar deals are done. And so, a lot of us don't know a whole lot about the deal. So I hesitate to comment on that. I'll talk about the process. I think the process should be open and transparent. But the bigger question is, what does this mean for college sports? And I think, we all look at College Park as important, but we have a lot of other Division I schools in Maryland, Towson and UMBC and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, a number of schools. And, I think that what Senator Cantwell's trying to do is come up with a more global solution than sort of what the Big Ten is trying to do. So, I mean, I think the verdict's out on it. I think they're going to have to provide a lot more information for some of these boards to decide on it. I've talked to other trustees, and they've had, they have questions. As I said, I don't know a lot about the deal, so it's hard to kind of opine on it. But I will say, I think there needs to be a more transparent process involved in it. And Senator Cantwell's gone so far as to say, look, schools that do these kind of deals are going too far down the commercial road, and maybe they should be taxed. And so, as far as their athletic program, so I don't know how this is all going to sort out. I think it's it's a very uncultivated land, so to speak. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it. But clearly college sports has an issue, and that is, they have a spending problem. I mean, the costs of college sports continue to go up and up and up and up. Now that they're going to be paying players, 20-some million a year. Facility costs are going up. And at some point in time, they're going to have to figure out, is that model sustainable? And, when I played, I mean, if we had three coaches on the sidelines, that was a lot. You look at the Maryland bench today, there's probably 6 or 7 or 8 coaches. So it's become the cost side of college sports has become an issue. And I think it's going to have to be looked at by the leaders of college sports because, at some point it can't be sustainable. Every school in the Big Ten, every school is borrowing money from the university to sustain itself. So Michigan, everybody. So it's not just a Maryland problem. It is a problem across the universe of college sports.
What do you think the timeline on this deal is, if there is one right now?
On which one?
The equity deal.
I really don't know. I know they postponed it. I think, from what I understand, USC and Michigan have concerns. Part of it is the grant of rights that goes out to 2045. And a lot of schools think, well, maybe we shouldn't go that far out into the future with the television markets and the broadcast markets and the digital markets changing so much. So there's a lot of, I talked to trustees in other schools. There's a lot of concern about it. So, I don't know what the time frame on it is, quite frankly. I think they're going to have to kind of regroup and figure out what a new process to move this forward.
You've dealt with a lot of kind of these congressional issues. Let's talk about your background here. When you were playing basketball at Maryland, did you ever think you would land in Congress? Len Elmore and you, it's a pretty stacked class in terms of former basketball players turned political influencers.
When I was at Maryland, I was a chemistry major, which was really pretty hard to do. And I was, I ended up being a chemistry major and playing basketball. It's hard because you have labs, as you know, you have labs every afternoon. I would have to show up to practice sometimes 5-10 minutes late because I had labs in the afternoon. I'm not even sure today where their kids could be a chemistry major. The one good thing about today compared to when I was in school is that they have more summer school opportunities. So a lot of kids go to school in the summer, which is good. Gives them a chance. Some kids get 2 degrees. So I'm not being totally critical here but it would have been hard to be a chemistry major. It was hard when I did it, but I was going to go to medical school if I didn't end up playing pro basketball. And then when I ended up winning the Rhodes Scholarship, I went to Oxford, and then that kind of got me interested in politics. So I didn't really think about, I worked in the Senate when I was at Maryland. I was involved. I was on a presidential commission. I was the youngest member of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports appointed by President Nixon. But I never thought that I was going to run for office until much.
A lot of athletes we've seen have tried to go from being professional athletes to going into politics, and it doesn't always work out. So what do you think for you allowed you to make that transition?
So I was playing for Ted Turner in 1983 or so, and I went to see him and I said, Ted, I love playing for the Atlanta Hawks. He was dynamic. He was doing some great things in business. And I said, I'd love to have you trade me back to Washington so I could run for Congress. And he did. He traded me back to Washington, and I played for 3 years there. In my last season, I announced for Congress. I ran for Congress when I was in the NBA, playing in the NBA. So I played a whole season as a candidate for Congress. What's interesting about that, and the reason why it worked out for me, is that I really planned ahead. I spent 3 or 4 years planning to do this. I just didn't all of a sudden decide to run for Congress. I spent years running to events, getting to know people, building a national kind of group of supporters. And so, to go from the NBA to Congress literally within weeks is pretty daunting. But the only way, it's opportunity meets preparation. And it was the preparation that I put into it that made the difference.
Switching over to your time at Maryland playing basketball, obviously you played for Lefty Driesell, legendary coach who had recently passed away. I wanted to know what your favorite stories of playing with Lefty are.
Well, it had to do with our travel to North Carolina. It was always difficult going down to Tobacco Road to play. But Lefty made it particularly difficult. He was quite superstitious. He always gave us little black cats sort of as good luck charms. But we went to Chapel Hill or any place down there, Raleigh, and if we didn't win a game, we never stayed at that hotel again. So Lefty would leave the hotel and never go back. And so his superstitions got to us because it was harder to find hotels after many years going down to North Carolina, but that was one of the most interesting things. But, he was a larger than life person. He really cared for his players. He really put Maryland on the map. I mean, Maryland, my brother played here 6 years before I did at Maryland with Gary Williams. And, people used to go to Cole Fieldhouse. It was during the games because it was a good place to study. And there were no fans in the stands. And Lefty changed all that. Cole Fieldhouse was sold out every game. It's one of the things that he was really big about. He felt that it was his duty to fill the arena. And he went to great extents to do so. And so we were sold out, literally almost every game of my career. And, it goes to show you that he was not just a great basketball coach. He was a promoter. He was larger than life, and someone that really put Maryland on the map.
And now to this year, there's a new era in College Park, obviously, with Buzz Williams at the helm. They've only played a few games so far under Buzz, but what have you seen from Buzz and kind of the direction that he's heading this program into?
Well, first of all, I have to give Dr. Pines and the leadership at Maryland great credit because I think they found a terrific coach. I mean, he's a winner. He's never won. He's never not done anything but win, whether it's Marquette or Virginia Tech or Texas A&M. He's a great basketball coach. I mean, he was dealt a really bad set of cards when he took over this job. He had no players. He had to go reboot that whole roster, and he did it. I mean, God bless him for what he did. And I think that over time, this team will, mature. As I said, he's a great coach. He worries about details, and I think the Maryland fans will be really, really happy with him. And from what I've seen, I'm very encouraged.
Tom, I don't mean to jog some old memories, but you were a part of the Olympic gold medal game in Russia in 1972. And for any basketball fans that don't know, this was a game that was played under some crazy controversy. 3 different endings to the game, basically, from my understanding, due to various rule interpretations. I'm sure you have plenty of stories from that game, but can you just kind of break down what happened, and if that is still to this day the craziest event you've ever been in?
It was pretty crazy because it was a world stage. We were playing on world television at midnight. We were playing in Munich at midnight because we were trying to telecast back to the United States and their time zones. It was 5 days after the Israeli athletes were murdered in the village, which was, mind-boggling to think that an Olympic village could be, attacked by terrorists. I mean, the word terrorism wasn't even a big word back then. It wasn't something that is more understood today than it was then. It was so unusual. And to see a village, an Olympic village built for sport, turn into this armed camp was, as I said, it was just mind-boggling. And as we watched the day go on, we still had to go practice. We had to get ready. We were playing the World Championship 5 days later. And so when we played against the Soviet Union, it was a game where we were playing against a team that was mostly 10 years older than us. They were pros. And we were, really amateurs in the sense that we were college students. And we were playing a very old-fashioned game. Hank Iba was a traditionalist, and he liked to throw the ball around, take his time on offense, and that wasn't necessarily the style of a lot of our players. So we finally got control of the game, and we came from behind and won it. And then, of course, the referees kept resetting the clock, and on the third time, the Soviets prevailed, and we refused to accept the silver medal. So to this day, we have no medal. We're a footnote in history, and will go down as probably the most controversial game in Olympic history.
Do you wish that you got the medal, like now looking back, or do you stand strong in the decision to boycott the silver medal?
Well, what happened was our team voted, so we all voted to not accept them at the time. In some respects, I wrote a letter to the International Olympic Committee a year ago and said, look, the medals are sitting in Lausanne, Switzerland, but it wouldn't be better if those medals were sitting in like a museum, like the Olympic Museum in the United States or the Naismith Museum or the Basketball Museum. Not that we would accept them, but people could understand the game and what happened. But the Olympic Committee said, look, we're not going to send those medals over there unless you're willing to accept them. And so none of our teammates were willing to accept them. And it's kind of unfortunate because those medals are going to sit in Switzerland forever. And the story will probably fade as all historical stories fade. But it was a moment in time in the Cold War against when the United States and the Soviets were fighting in so many different arenas. Here we ended up fighting on an Olympic basketball stage. And I think that's the historic symbolism of it.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, Tom. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on. Great stories. You have a pretty storied life. So we had to bring you on under the show and chat with you. So thanks again, Tom.
Listen, College Park is a great university. It's Dr. Pines and all the leadership have done marvelous things. And so I'm a proud alumnus, and go Terps.
Thanks, Tom. We appreciate your time.